All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you the Monday after a long Thanksgiving weekend. Great to have Arlen with us. Arlen, this is apparently your last stream with me from Vermont. Is that accurate? At least for now. I mean, it could change in a year or 9 months or whatever, but at least for the time being, you're moving back to California.
I'm moving back to Monterey, so about 2.5 weeks. I will be there, and then we could resume at maybe at a different hour. But we could continue this if people wanted to continue. I'm here.
Well, the only person who you have to worry about is me, and I do want it to continue for a lot of reasons. I think you bring an interesting, well educated. I don't want to say educated, well informed. Not that you're not well educated, but it's informed. That's important. To be an informed voice, and one that's somewhat different than mine. So we have, a little bit of a clash on occasion, which I think makes for better live streaming. We'll talk about your latest in the big picture report a little bit further on in the program and get to the political topics du jour. And I've been focused almost, not exclusively, but pretty much every live stream has been on Israel, Gaza. So that's going to continue today. But let's just talk personally for a moment. How was your Thanksgiving? I didn't bring this up off air, but I'm curious if you had a nice holiday.
Yeah, we did. We had 10 people all together, mostly Nancy's relatives, but our 2 children were able to make it, and we had a lot of food, and it turned out to be pretty well, I think.
All right, so they came came east, is that right? Or did you go? That's right. Your kids came from California to see you?
We're in Vermont. We're in southern Vermont, and so our children came from California, so they had to do some airline flying to get here, but it worked out, and they're on their way back to their jobs and whatever. And as I mentioned before, Hal, I see a lot of snow in front of me. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was it a white Thanksgiving or only now since the holiday?
We've had occasional snowy days. I'd say about every 4 or 5 days we've had snow, and then it would disappear, and then it would come back again, like overnight.
Yeah, it's so nice when it gets like that. I mean, with the global warming, the new Holocaust, as I call it, there's less and less. Been going up to Vermont for many years, up until a few years ago, because my mom had a place there, much like you and Nancy do. And in recent years, you'd often have the green Christmases, which we were almost never. I mean, I won't say never. There were green Christmases in Vermont, but few, but more and more in recent times. And also, sometimes we wouldn't see those lakes frozen over the way they always were. So just some obvious, evidence of global warming.
I have been here in Christmas. It was like 0 degrees or whatever. And I stayed indoors a lot, but you just don't know. It's very unpredictable in Vermont right now. They've had some unusual weather, and they will probably continue to have unusual weather in the future.
So, Arlen, before we play that first video I've got up, we've got the Israel-Hamas truce, which very unfortunately looks like it may be coming to an end. But just it's obviously horrible what's happening. I mean, I don't think anyone feels good. Maybe there are a few extremists who are looking towards Armageddon or something, but just any preliminary ideas on what we're seeing, and also your thoughts on this temporary truce.
Yeah, apparently, the last I heard is that truce is going to continue at least for a couple more days. So that is good. We don't want to go back to all the fighting in the war. And so the longer the truce goes on, I think everyone will feel better, or at least most people will feel better. And, I hope it goes on permanently if possible.
Well, Arlen, I'm glad you mentioned about that. It appearing that the truce will continue, because I didn't realize that I don't know what you call it, a truce or a ceasefire. The ceasefire, I thought that was still up in the air, but you're saying some breaking news coming out that suggests
yes, apparently
continuing
it will continue for a little while.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, as long as the hostages are coming out, I think Israel is willing to, stop the fighting for a while, and hopefully it'll last for a longer time. You got countries like Qatar and Egypt that are trying to negotiate with everybody, and Biden is trying to negotiate with Netanyahu, or at least trying to convince Netanyahu to back down a little bit. So, we'll have to see who has the most clout.
How much credit do you think Joe Biden deserves for the ceasefire that began, I guess, in earnest Friday? You said it's a 4-day, so or the original, and hopefully it'll be extended. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, today's Monday, that's the fourth day. How much credit do you give our president for the ceasefire?
Well, it's really hard to know because we're not there when he talks to Netanyahu, and we're not there. Nobody's reporting on, what they're talking about. But, if there's a ceasefire and Biden's been talking to Netanyahu about maybe easing things up a bit, you got to figure some of it's getting through to Netanyahu, because he originally was just, gung-ho for total destruction of Gaza.
Yeah, and Jennifer Rubin in the Washington Post, she's a neocon, pretty conservative, used to be a hard right Republican, big supporter of, I think if she goes back that far, she's relatively young, but I believe she was a big supporter of George W, not George H. She's not that old, but George W. Bush, and an opponent of Obama, has become a real cheerleader for sort of the corporate Democratic pro-military establishment. She gives, Biden an A, says that it's his embrace of Netanyahu, pushing Netanyahu, just playing him just the right way. We're going to hear a conflicting view in a moment that suggests that Biden hasn't done enough, and, that he deserved blame for the enormous number of casualties. But there's definitely a difference of opinion on that. I assume you're sort of in the middle, or you just said, I don't want to put words in your mouth. We don't know, right? We don't know what he's saying. It's hard for the layperson to really fairly judge Biden at this point.
Well, he's got a lot of collateral, whatever. He's got a lot of money that's important to Israel, and support for weapons and money and everything, and so he should have some clout, and I'm hoping he's using it. I know Netanyahu could be very stubborn, but if we're getting a truce now, I'd say it's a positive thing for Biden. I think it looks good.
Well, he's going to need that truce because his popularity is in the toilet, as we know. And a big reason for that is the war, or at least the killing in the Middle East. I don't like the term war. I don't think this really captures a war, which is, to me, at least two reasonably comparable forces. Instead, you have one of the most advanced militaries in the world up against very primitive by today's standards and very small force. All right, let's go to, and I think the Al Qaeda, Al Jazeera, not Al Qaeda. Al Jazeera network does a nice job. They've got a lot of reporters on the ground because they speak Arabic. They are able, I think, to capture a lot of nuances that other media doesn't. So here's Al Jazeera reporting from Gaza. See if we can get this to play.
Well, let's find out what's happening on the ground in Gaza now. Hani Mahmoud is in Khan Yunis in
got
southern
the
Gaza.
wrong
are people in
video.
Gaza
Let me stop that, folks. Sorry. And this, I got mocked by our friend Jeff for my mistakes. And all I can say, Jeff, this is really hard. And plus, I'm exhausted. So there you go. So that's my whine. And as I say to my wife, everyone loves a whiner. So here we go.
Said that it does want to extend the current truce. What do you think are Hamas's main motivations in wanting this truce extended?
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. Did you hear that, Arlen? Did you hear the question?
Yes.
I want to make sure. So the question,
yes,
I think this was the world's dumbest. What is Hamas's motivation? I mean, it seems obvious. They just want the killing to stop, right? I mean, is that a hard one? But we'll hear a little bit more nuance in the response. But I was like, really? That's the lead question. But what did you think, Arlen? Was that the first thing you thought too?
Well, another thing is, it'll give Hamas a chance to regroup. I'm sure they're really shattered. And if there's some quiet time where they have ability to move around and do things, then they could, improve their situation and regroup. So that may be part of it too.
Well, that was the Hillary Clinton Netanyahu argument against a ceasefire was, hey, we've got Hamas on the run. We're giving them a chance, right? That's their argument against it. Fortunately, for now, slightly less maniacal voices seem to have prevailed. All right, let's get back to this video.
Good morning. Well, I think that the motivations on the side of Hamas are rather obvious. I mean, after so many destructions and killings and all that, they need to, first of all, they need aid to come into the strip, the Gaza Strip, and this is what this truce is about. It's not only about hostages. It's about also allowing trucks, lorries, bringing aid into the strip to come in. And they also probably need some time to reorganize because they have been dealt a very, very heavy blow with this absolutely brutal invasion that has been going on since October 7.
And this is also about...
All right, let me stop it again. So exactly what you said, Arlen, exactly what he said, what I said. He added what you pointed out, which is that Hamas has been dealt these heavy blows, and this gives them an opportunity, I guess, to kind of regroup. So kind of a obvious question and answer, but I think the professor there did a nice job just sort of laying it out for us. And, you know, good. Let's just hope the killing stops. More from this interview. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had some thoughts last couple of days, and that is if Israel allowed Hamas to stay in Gaza, I think what they could do is, you know, make sure that the border is heavily covered by Israel so that there's no military preparation going on there, because they got fooled last time. You know, they didn't see, they saw it, but they didn't realize it was anything. But now that they know that the capabilities of Hamas, I think they could be prepared for anything that Hamas would do, especially if they fortify their own border and, you know, the Gaza border.
I think what Israel has to do more than anything, I've said this before, they've got to have international peacekeeping. They've got to have the UN in there. They've got to have Egypt in there. They've got to have, you know, maybe some of the Emirates, because those are wealthier countries, like which is there's one, not Bahrain, Qatar. Have those countries in there with an international force. That would, I think, be much more. I would be much more sanguine. But Israel doesn't want international oversight, and we've seen the deadly results of that attitude.
There's one more thing that's necessary, and that is for everybody to agree on a two-state solution, which Netanyahu does not like, and, you know, Hamas doesn't like, but I think it's totally necessary. And there's a very good editorial in the New York Times about how they're pushing a two-state solution as really the only realistic way to have peace in that area.
Well, that's where we disagree, Arlen. I think the only realistic way is a one-state solution. I do agree. I know this is considered some sort of attack on Israel, but I agree with from the mountains to the sea, Palestine has to be free. That means one state where everyone who lives there is an equal citizen with equal political rights, guaranteed economic security. To me, that's the only solution. I don't know how you could even have a two-state solution.
You're talking about Israel being, you know,
Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, one country. Call it Israel, Israelistine, or whatever you want to call it. Palace, Israel, I don't care. Israelistine, but it's got to be one country. I don't see any other options.
Well, yeah, I mean, and maybe it is. Maybe that is a two-state solution. If they have that as their, you know, total have total control of that, and you have Israel on the other side. That's
no one country. One country. All of it is one country. Gaza, Haifa, Jerusalem, the West Bank. That's one country. Between Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, one country.
That, you know, Israel would never go for that.
Well, then they're going to be facing endless war. To me, Israel's choices are either endless war, becoming what they claim to be, what they hate most, Nazis themselves, or, you figure out a way to realize that everyone who lives in that region deserves self-determination and freedom and, political and economic security.
But
I don't know how you get that otherwise.
Well, there has been two-state solution processes going, in history that always fell apart because, somebody didn't want them. But, there were some realistic, I think, plans to do that. And that's what the New York Times talks about. They almost got to that point, but they never did. And I think a two-state solution is necessary because you've got to give the Palestinians a place where they can live in control and have Israel have its own country that, Jews are the major population there. And that's about the only way I think we're going to get anywhere.
Why can't they all just live together? Why can't they all just live together? I don't understand why this is some crazy pipe dream. I mean, Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, we all live side by side in America. We don't always get along, but we can't, there's no other options. It's the only way. So I don't understand why that, I'm not trying to be funny. I know people think I'm crazy when I say that. I don't think anything else is even remotely feasible as a solution, frankly.
Well, you have history, to think about it, and they've always been clashing, and they probably always will clash. That's why I think they need to be separated. And, to have everybody in one country would just never work, I don't think. I don't see how.
Arlen, they haven't always been clashing. This is something my son always says. And I point out, no, the clashes were in Europe. The religious wars were in Europe. For centuries, Jews and Muslims lived reasonably peaceably side by side. There have been ancient, 1,000-year-old Jewish communities in Baghdad, in Beirut, in Damascus, in Morocco. I don't know all the cities there, Tripoli. And it was, they survived through the Holocaust, whereas 1,000-year-old Jewish culture and cities or, neighborhoods really were utterly destroyed. So the religious wars were in Europe, and now Jews and non-Jews in Europe seem to be able to get along okay. I mean, again, there's always going to be tensions because people are tribal. But I don't think there's anything unique about the Israeli-Muslim relation or Jewish-Muslim relationship that means they can't get along.
Well, I think that Israel needs their own country that they could feel safe and secure in. If they were just part of all these other countries, they would be very vulnerable to political changes and all kinds of things. But if they have their own country and they feel secure in it, and they've obviously done a good job of protecting themselves, I think that's fine. And I think there should be a competing Palestine, state that maybe not like Israel, but it would be their own. And that's where you have the two-state solution.
Well, Arlen, I hate to keep pushing back at you. I hope you don't mind. It's somewhat spirited, but I don't think the Israelis do feel particularly secure. I think what happened on October 7th demonstrates that they're not safe within Israeli borders. And obviously they don't feel that way since they've killed about 15,000 Palestinians in response. So it's hard for me to say that because they have this their own country, they're now secure. And it does seem, I could be totally wrong, but I spent time in Europe. That's really the only place other than the United States, Canada. And I personally have never experienced any anti-Semitism whatsoever. I barely, maybe some, I won't say never. I mean, the United States, I've had people say comments that were, clearly aggressive and reflected dislike for Jewish people in general. But I don't feel like I'm safer. I think, and I've read this too, some Jewish people saying that our true security is in the United States and nowhere else. So I don't see that Israel has made us safer. I get the Holocaust. Obviously, Jews have never been particularly safe, but I don't see that Israel has made us safer.
I think, I don't know about us, but it has made Israel safer because they have a tremendous military that no one, is able to come up to. And, they feel secure in that way. They know they're always going to be attacked here and there, and there's going to be problems, but at least they know they've got their own state. And I think it's important to them, and they're certainly not going to give it up.
All right, great conversation. I wouldn't. I was about to move on, but give it up. I see. To me, it's not giving it up. To me, it's recognizing the justice of all human beings living within a particular region, having equal say over their living conditions. And I don't know how you could possibly get there with a two-state solution. If you had a two-state solution, then presumably the Muslims who are living in Israel right now would have to move. Would you relocate everyone with the many, I don't know, a few 100,000 Muslims who are living within Israel proper? Would they have to move to the West Bank and Gaza? Would the Israeli settlers in the West Bank, some of whom have lived there for decades, many who have just recently moved there, would they all have to pick up their belongings and move back to Israel? I mean, how would you work that? It seems pretty, seems like a lot of a logistical nightmare, much like the split up of East and West Pakistan was back in the 40s when India became independent. And they pushed out a lot of Muslims. They pushed a lot of Muslims into Pakistan and Bangladesh.
It would be something that has to be planned and developed, and it would involve a lot of negotiation, as to what you do about the Arabs that are in Israel, because for one thing, their population is growing faster than the Israeli population. At least that's what I've heard. So, Israel wants to make sure that the Jewish people are the ones in charge of that country. So, that's going to be important. And, it's just something that has to be planned out. And they have had good plans in history, but they've never been able to come together to do it because there's always somebody that says, no way, we won't do it.
All right, you're watching Halitics with Arlen Grossman and Hal, of course. I'm Hal. And Arlen, you can see as well on the screen. It says Political Pundit. We're going to talk about the big picture report. Often we get into these long dialogues. I hope you find them as interesting and as informative as I do. That's what we do here. By the way, you can give us a call, 240, I say us, meaning you can call Arlen and me right now, 240-363-7190 if you want to comment on anything that we're discussing. I want to play a little more. I do find this professor interesting, Arlen. I've got more videos as well. Maybe we'll skip over some of them, but just a little more because he talks about the human toll of the Israeli attack, occupation, whatever term you want to use, of Gaza.
Releasing Palestinian prisoners in this exchange that we've been seeing in recent days. Do you think that Hamas thinks it has the chance of getting many more Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli custody?
I think so, but I don't think this. Given the fact that the terms of exchange are no longer the kind of terms that you had in the past, when you had one Israeli soldier, Gilad Halitics, exchange for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. What they're getting now, the effect of it has already been there in the West Bank, but that's not the main goal, I would say. I'm pretty sure that their main concern is what is going on inside the Gaza Strip, much more than any other target.
So we've had, of course,
Oh, and I just cut it off there. Sorry about that, folks. I thought it was going to go a little longer. I have more of that video. But I'm not going to play too much more because it's more interesting to me, at least, and maybe to you, when Arlen and I are discussing. What I wanted him to talk about was the latest death count and the latest casualty count. Over 15,000 dead Gazans as a result of Israel's attack. And this, according to the professor, maybe it was in the other video I have, you have to go back to at least Vietnam or maybe the Second World War to find comparably deadly conflict in terms of the number of dead per day. And of course, almost, the vast majority of those, especially if after October 7, which was a terrorist attack, not really a, quote, war is what we have now, are almost all Palestinians. So doesn't Biden have also a humanitarian obligation now to do everything he can to stop it? Keep the ceasefire going?
Yeah, he definitely does. I mean, I'm as horrified as you are by the count of the civilians that are getting killed, women, children. I think Israel overreacted in their response, and I'm glad we have the truce now, but because if we keep on going, it's only going to get worse. And, I don't know if the rest of the world will accept that, but, Netanyahu knows he's in a tough spot because there's a lot of criticism of him and of Israel for that kind of overreaction to their being attacked.
All right, let's get into the political implications. We're going to jump to the bigpicturereport.com, which is where Arlen writes, where he posts. It's his website. And so this is from that. And Arlen, this is not really, this is about the Senate. And I want to stick with Biden for a moment longer, but I think the Israel-Gaza conflict is actually very germane, very pertinent to what you wrote and what you obviously quoted or reposted from New York Times columnist Jamel Bouie. So this is, you quote, the Senate is getting less democratic by the minute. Your concern is that the election is shaping up very well for Republicans in terms of the number of seats, which seats are at risk, which seats are actually at risk, but which seats are also just up for re-election. I would just add to that many Democratic voters seem, including myself, so upset about, or generally leaning Democratic voters are so upset by what we're seeing in the Middle East and the very, what we would consider to be unacceptable response by the Democrats, that we really don't feel like we can go vote for them, or we have no interest. We're not enthusiastic. Maybe some of us in the end will come around, but there's clearly an enthusiasm gap among many other factors that are going to play into what could be, as you're implying, what Bouie suggests, could be a Republican rout in 24. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. This year has been a good year for Democrats. No one thought, Biden he won. The Democrats took the Senate in 2020, which many didn't expect. So I think these predictions can often be wrong. But again, I think one thing that hurts the Democrats is their pro-war stance, both in Israel and in Ukraine, which hurts them with many hard left voters. And to me, this is very interesting because on the one hand, I want to stay like that. And also with environmental voters, we view the Biden Democratic policies as harmful, as maybe they're not as bad as Republican, but they're bad. So it's ironic, right? I mean, this is something you rail against, but it's ironic because the Republicans are worse, and yet when hard lefties called Joe Biden Genocide Joe, that makes it perhaps more likely that somebody who's just going to support Israel regardless, like a DeSantis, like a Trump, will win. And yet, by really pushing Biden hard, we may change his policies. So where do you come down? What's the balance? What do you do? What do you do in those situations?
I just don't think that Biden is thought of as a pro-war president. I think the Democratic Party, I don't think is pro-war either. I think they would like to see things fixed up, and they're probably all happy about the truce. I mean, you're painting the Democrats as like a war party, and I don't think they are.
I think this is the perception that many have. Maybe I think the perception is accurate. You don't, but I think that is the perception. And what we're trying to do is push them to become more of a pro-peace party. But don't you think, at least to be fair, Arlen, even if the Democrats are not nearly, when it came to Ukraine, there were more pro-peace people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who opposed more aid to Israel. So there's a case by case basis here, right? I mean, some Republicans seem to be against more money for the Pentagon and more money for foreign military support.
Yeah, you mentioned Ukraine. I forgot all about Ukraine. I haven't heard about Ukraine for a long time. So everything is right now centered on Gaza. So we'll have to see what happens after the Gaza part settles down. What's going on in Ukraine, because that seems to be a stalemate. And they're losing some of their support, the Ukraine government, but I still think they have behind them they have Europe and the United States. And
well, what about the political though? Let's just focus on the politics. And I remember we had a little bit of a disagreement about where the American people stand on aid to Ukraine and to Israel. And it seems, again, to me, and I did show you a graphic that suggests strongly that Americans were becoming very tired of the support for Ukraine. The same is true for their support for Israel. So is it good that that progressives, some Democrats are saying, hey, I may not vote for you. I'm sure not going to give you any money if you continue your pro-military positions. Is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, it's good in the sense that it may push the Democrats to be more pro-peace, but I guess the concern is, at least your concern is, that this could help elect Republicans. So
well,
where do you balance that out? Where do you balance that out? Where do you balance your desire for peace with your fear of the Republican Party?
Well, the Ukraine, at least all the Democrats right now, as far as I know, are supportive of the Ukraine. And I think most Republicans are too. They won't, there's a few that aren't and don't want any money to go to Ukraine. But I think overall, we're in support of helping Ukraine, although it has dropped a little bit in the polls. I will say that. But I think it's absolutely necessary that we win there, because to allow Putin to invade a country like Ukraine and then take it over sends a very bad message to the rest of the world, and it encourages Putin
But you're sort of missing my point a little bit. I'm not really arguing it, or I'm not really questioning the policy. I do that all the time. What I'm really asking is the politics. What is the right politic from a purely political, let's win the elections next year? That's what I'm saying. What should the Democrats do?
Well, they got to keep supporting Ukraine. How much that might be negotiable. And
Israel as well, or in terms of these two, is there a way?
Yeah, I think that's a given. Israel's going to be supported. Ukraine's going to be supported. Now, how much, and you could quibble about, but that's always been our position, and I'm sure it will continue to be that way. And I think most Republicans are in agreement with that too. The Republican Party in Congress.
All right, Arlen, let's get to the piece that you were taken by, written by Jamelle Bouie, the New York Times. So you linked to that, but you also added your own comments. So can you describe for us what Bouie was saying that you found, I guess, captivating or worth reposting, and also your unique take?
Well, it's the kind of election, every 2 years you have an election that reflects what happened 6 years ago. So apparently the Democrats did very well 6 years ago, because right now they're defending 23 of the 34 Senate seats that are up for grabs. So that's a lot. They're going to have to really do very well to get even with the Republicans. If they were to lose all 7 of those, for example, they would start the next session with a weak minority of senators. It's fewest since the days of Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover.
Let me say it. Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover. You should remember Herbert Hoover, Arlen. I would assume. Maybe don't go back quite that far.
I know the vacuum cleaner, but
he lived a long life. I'm for some reason, it's in my mind, he may have lived the longest of any president until Jimmy Carter, but I could be wrong about that, of course. But I think Hoover lived quite a long life. Anyway, so he may have overlapped with you. I think he lived well into the 1950s. I don't think I was ever alive when Herbert Hoover was alive. So Democrats facing very significant potential losses. You quote here, of course, that the Republicans could win a majority of Senate seats while only representing a minority of Americans. That's often the case, right? I mean, because, they get 2 seats in Wyoming, they get 2 in Montana, they get 2 in, it used to be 2 in New Hampshire. Now that's not the case anymore. They get 2 in Alaska. Although I think there's a Democrat now, right? Isn't there a Democrat in one of the Alaska seats? Maybe I'm wrong. Don Young, is he? I don't know. But yes, there are a number of large states geographically, but small in population. The Dakotas, that are reliably red. The only truly reliably blue, very small state is, of course, Vermont, where you are.
True. One thing Bowie said is roughly half of Americans, that's 169 million people, live in the 9 most populous states. And together, those states get 18 of the 100 seats in the United States Senate. That's not very much.
It's outrageous. It's not Democrat. It's not a democracy in that regard at all.
No, there's no democracy in our voting system, and it really needs to be changed. I don't know how, but it's really obsolete. And, it doesn't work out because majorities should rule, majorities of people, not just majorities of states.
Well, one thing that some Republicans would argue is, well, the 4 biggest states by far are California, and I think this is in order. Maybe Florida's number 2 now. I think it's Texas, but maybe Florida. But let's go California, Texas, Florida, New York, right? And so of those 4, 2 are Republican and 2 are Democratic. So they'd say, well, look, see, it's all balanced. It all works out. It's fair. But it isn't, because California and New York are far more blue. They're not close to purple. They're dark blue. Whereas Texas is red, but it's getting pinker, if that's, or purple. Whatever. What is blue and red together? I don't know. Purple. It's getting purpler. And Florida is pretty purpler. Pretty purple. Yeah. They do elect Republicans, actually, but it's close. So you have a bias there where the big Democratic majority still doesn't get an advantage where it should. And of course, we mentioned the small states are where the Republicans run up the score.
And you also have to think about all the states that are blue are pretty much much more diverse than the red states, and you have all the minorities.
I'm going to argue that point. Texas and Florida are very diverse. I don't know if I agree with that, Arlen.
Well, anyway, that's the way it seems to me as far as
I know, but I don't know if I can endorse that. Well, it's true, but those rural states are less diverse. That is for sure true. That's absolutely right. But even there, you have a large Native American populations in some of these states, and many Latinos in some of the smaller states as well. But I would agree. Yeah, I think when you drill down, I shouldn't argue with that point. But it's a little more nuanced. It's not quite as clear as you suggested, I think. So what should we do? What do we need to do, if anything, about this obviously anti-democratic situation?
Unfortunately, I don't know what we can do, because it's all baked into the Constitution, and the smaller states are not going to give up any advantage that they have. But one thing that I like what Bowie says is that as we've expanded the scope of democratic participation, more people involved, we have affirmed again and again that it is the people who deserve representation on an equal basis, not the states. Which again, that's majority rule. It should be the case. And I don't know what they could possibly do about it right now, but it's something that we have to think about and plan ahead for the future.
There are solutions have been propounded for the problem of the Electoral College, which of course follows what you're talking about right here, because every state gets the number of electors it gets are its senators, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's the senators plus representatives. So the states that are the smallest, with the smallest number, like North Dakota, has only 3 electoral votes because it has 2 senators and 1 representative. Whereas California has the most because they have the most reps plus 2 senators. But that still works out where a small state has much greater influence over, a small population state has much greater influence per person over who becomes president than a large state. There are solutions propounded to that. For example, the rule that a state agrees to give all of its electoral votes to the candidate who wins the general election population, not the Electoral College. So that would address it. But as you said, Arlen, I don't know any solutions that have been proposed for this the Senate, where a representative from a senator from Wyoming, like a Dick Cheney, has an equal vote as a Chuck Schumer or a Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah. Well, that's that's the obvious solution, I guess, would be constitutional amendment, but we know that's almost impossible to do because you have to get like 2/3 of the states to agree to it, and it's just not going to happen. And like I said, the smaller states are just want to keep it like it is because it's to their advantage to do that. So constitutional amendment, it's not going to work. I don't know what will work, except like you said, if everybody agrees to give their votes to the person who has the popular vote. If you could get enough states to do that, that would be nice.
You can do that for president, but you can't do that for the Senate. You couldn't. That would work for presidential elections. That compact, because there is this interstate compact that has been proposed. A lot of states have signed on, but that would not solve the Senate problem one whit.
And it's funny, they talk about, and I think it's this article about when they were coming up with these ideas, the Federalist Society or whatever, they didn't like the idea of the states having that much power, but they figured that was the only way they were going to get things passed. So there's a history behind it, but right now it's just totally undemocratic, in my opinion.
So basically, you've provided a problem in search of a solution, Arlen. You have no answers. All you're doing is rubbing your hands in consternation and leaving us all irritated, leaving us all angry and upset about a problem that we can't fix. Well, there it is. Thank you so much, Arlen. Well, let me say this. I'll give you a solution. The Democratic Party should act in a way that really benefits the people who live in these poor states, these rural states, so that they'll vote for Democrats. Like maybe recognize that the Affordable Care Act was a terrible mistake and has led to the shuttering of lots of rural hospitals, and the people who live in those states are bitter and angry, so that we need to figure out a way to get them health care.
Well, at least the Democrats are giving women the choices to do what they want to do with their own bodies. And then that's been a very powerful turnout for Democrats in these elections, because even Republicans don't like the idea of government having so much control over a woman's body and whether she can have an abortion or not. You got that Tommy Tuberville, the senator from Alabama, has way too much power.
Yes, it's the Republicans are really bad. That's why the Democrats need to figure this out. But it's also why I would argue that the Democrats need to govern for all Americans rather than, I don't even know who. I guess they're donors and maybe people in blue states who they feel they need their votes. But I agree. We would all be better off if the Democrats adopted these pro-rural people vote, pro-rural policies as well, but they sadly don't.
Well, it's not easy to do. You got to appease a lot of people, and there's only two parties, and you got to make sure that everybody's happy, and that's impossible to do. So, they've got work to do, and they've failed a lot of things, but at least they have some solutions, which the other party does not.
In some ways, no question, they're far superior. So, Arlen, I was very intrigued by your piece, which again, where you look to Bowie, who is a very well regarded New York Times columnist, because it actually, interestingly, and if you look at the slide I just posted, and I only jumped on this because the news isn't all favorable for Republicans, nor is it all gloom and doom. Not that you were saying it was. I'm not saying you were, but I just want to give a counterpoint. Here we have the New York Times reporting, I believe this is in today's paper, maybe it was over the weekend. Republicans are not seeing an influx of cash, and we know money is the mother's milk of politics. So they're actually facing their own challenges.
Well, I think I'm very skeptical of those kind of news stories because, sure, you may have some of the rules that make that happen, but you also have billionaires with so much money, and the Supreme Court has said they could do whatever they want with their money, and there's dark money, and just a lot of ways that the Republicans could put in tons of money, and they've got a lot of billionaires that are on their side, like Elon Musk. So,
well, this is true, but there are billionaires who take the Democratic side too. And I would note that Trump, whatever any of us think of him, is also not a darling of the billionaire class. They are much more comfortable with, say, a Nikki Haley, a corporatist like Nikki Haley, who seems reasonably moderate on other issues and is clearly not a populist, isn't trying to excite the passions of the working class against elites, of whom billionaires are certainly part. So Trump is not a guy who helps generate a lot of money necessarily, especially for the Republican Party. So that could also hurt them.
I don't think it's a lock that he's going to get the nomination either, because he's in the months ahead, he's going to get considered guilty and have sentences, felony sentences against him, and he's going to keep saying weirder and weirder things, because he seems to be doing that. He seems to be getting almost senile in a lot of his statements, and he's making a lot of mistakes, and he's getting older too. So, it's a long time. It's almost a year, and a lot can happen, but I don't think he's an automatic lock.
His support seems pretty solid. We haven't seen any real cracks in him in his support.
Now,
So I would be surprised if he's not the nominee. I guess if he goes to jail, that could change. But at this point, he's looking like a pretty solid bet, I'd say. I certainly wouldn't bet against Trump. I'm just making the point that I don't think the elite class, whatever you want to call them, the corporate elites, the richest Americans, are not all in for Republicans in this cycle, mainly because I think they remain trepidatious, if that's a word, about Trump and his, they like business as usual, and he's a wild card. He's not easily controlled by them.
That is true. He's not. And I don't think that, by the time the Republican voters get into the ballot box, or they're getting ready to vote, and they think about all the things that Trump has done, and, all the trouble he's in, and all the weird things he says, they may think twice about voting for him. Now it's easy to say, oh, I want Trump, but when it comes down to crunch time, I don't know if that's going to be happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't. As I said, I personally, I would not bet. I don't bet anyway, because I just have, when I look at those, we talked about this too, and I look at those football games, my kids put these little, I'm very glad, kind of wimpy bettors. They put $5 here, $8 there. But every game, it seems like, goes down to the wire. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my kids had a bet on the Eagles, minus 2.5. They won by 3 in overtime. So he's sitting there chewing every game, it seems like, in the Vegas has these games doped out very, very well. And a lot of times it's the results are just a fumble. When you compare with the spread that Vegas provides, if you win or lose your bet, it's because of a fumble you could never have expected, or, a bad, a referee's error. So I don't bet, but who knows with these elections?
Yeah. I think people should be betting on, or should be, let's put it this way, rooting for teams. When they start to root for other teams just because of the point spread, it just takes a lot away from football, I think.
All right, let's move to a totally different topic than we've been focused. Well, it's not 100% different, but I was taken by this op-ed. I actually have started to get a Wall Street Journal subscription, and it's actually because I joined their wine club, which is a really nice deal. You may want to look into this. There's no obligations. They give you, I got 14 bottles of wine delivered to my house. This is not a testimony. Nobody's paying me to say this, but they sent 14 bottles of wine to my house for about $85. So if you do the math, that's like what, $6 a bottle. And I looked them up, and these were bottles of wine that retail for, and that included the postage, right? It was a $70, so $5, basically $5 a bottle for 14 bottles. Then with the postage, another 15, which it's heavy, so you have to pay a lot to get it shipped. It's included, everything's included. These are $15 to $20 bottles that retail. So it's a good deal. It's a good deal. There's no obligation, quit at any time. Anyway, and part of the Wall Street Journal's enticement to me was I get this like a month free or whatever subscription. Wall Street Journal, I don't really agree with their politics generally, but this really caught my eye. We should all give thanks for Taylor Swift. She's the most popular entertainer, I would say, on the planet. I know Beyonce and the Beehive will argue that. Maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't follow this. I don't listen to either one. I could barely recognize either of their songs. But what Peggy Noonan, former Ronald Reagan speechwriter, says is, did I get that right? Was that what she was? She was, right?
Yeah,
she was, yeah. So what Peggy says is, Peggy Noonan, I call her by her first name. I may have even interviewed her. For some reason, I'm thinking I spoke to her once in my old Monterey days. She was very, very polite, very sweet. If I did interview her. So what she has to say is that Taylor Swift deserves the Time Person of the Year award. And I will just say this, Arlen, I have no problem with that. I'm good with that. Where do you stand on that?
I don't have a problem with it either, because there's nobody who's against Taylor Swift. I mean, she's very popular. Everybody likes her. She has no enemies, and that's pretty rare in a country like ours when we're so divided in so many ways. So, she inspires people. She brings a lot of money into the economy. She seems to, doesn't have scandals, and there's a lot to be said for her, and it wouldn't bother me. I mean, who else?
Well, what my wife points out is she's very generous. She gave $100,000 to each of her truck drivers and her crew. I don't know if every crew member, but that's part of the concert etiquette is that at the end of a tour, the act, the talent gives tips or gratuities or whatever you want to call it to everyone who helped her or helped them on their tour. And Taylor Swift's was really, really, really generous, more so than the standard in the industry. So that's something that definitely made my wife like her more. She doesn't have violent lyrics. I don't want to say it's quite a G-rated act, because her outfits are somewhat, I don't want to say revealing. I don't know what. I mean, I guess that's just what we have now in the world of concerts. But as Noonan says, I mean, she's generous. She brings a lot of money to the economy. She's beloved. She's a huge cultural phenomenon. And frankly, as you, I think, indicated, Arlen, I don't know who would be a better choice for Person of the Year.
It would be tough. And she also, don't forget, has an NFL boyfriend, which, piques people's interest. They like that idea. But I think she's smart to give money to her staff, because, they'll be happy. And she's going to still end up with tons of money. In fact, I think
she's a billionaire. She has now joined the ranks of the billionaire club. So
I think first one. I think she's the first one to do that, just based on her, show business career. So it's pretty amazing.
I don't know, maybe some of the Beatles, but I guess because they owned a lot of assets, whereas she gets it from her concerts and just purely sales of her downloads and the like. But I mean, I can't object. I mean, I don't see any reason not to. She is she's incredibly famous worldwide. Her international tour is doing extraordinarily well. So yeah. Fine. There you go, Ms. Swift. Good luck. I'll be good with it. I mean, there will always be controversy, sadly. I think there might be some activists who would say she's getting it because, she's white, she's pretty, she's blonde, she's acceptable to the cultural elites. I don't think that most, if you want to use the word normie or normal, people would feel that way. But I think there's going to be a sense that she's among some. And I get it. I, by the way, get this argument. She's an acceptable face, right? She's non-threatening. And I get that concern, but whether she's non-threatening or not, she's putting people in the seat. She's selling a lot of popcorn. So, and I say that too because she's got a movie coming out. So,
there's no negativity. There's no scandals. There's nothing really bad. Like I said, she doesn't seem to have enemies. So sure, there's always going to be some people who, feel that what you were talking about. But I think 95% of the Americans will say that's a good choice. We like her.
I think you're right. And on that note, Arlen, where we agree, do you want to throw any monkey wrenches into the remember, this is your opportunity because you're going back to California. We've got to argue about times. Arlen is he needs his full 12 hours of sleep. So I got to start the show a little later if I'm going to keep him on, which I'm considering, but it's a big ask. It's a big ask.
Yeah. So I think what most concerns me right now is the Republicans are just too confident. They seem like they're very aggressive. They're very trying to do everything and super confident. And the Democrats don't seem that way to me. They seem to be kind of weak and not sure what to do. And that bothers me.
Yeah, but Arlen, remember how confident the Democrats were in 2016 before the Clinton-Trump election, and you had a guy who said he would eat a bug if Trump won. Remember there was this Princeton guy, this professor. Oh, I'm so sure. Of course, nobody's going to 99% chance. I'll eat a bug on live bug on TV if she wins. And Rachel Maddow, she was basically tearing out her hair. The one pleasure, the one joy I got out of the Trump years, not the only, but that certainly those memories are certainly etched and bring a smile to my face. But remember, the Democrats were confident, cocky, smirky, and then it all went up in flames. So it could be just the reverse, right?
You remember all the Democrats that said, if Trump got elected, I'm moving to Canada.
Yeah,
and of course, that never happens. But you'll hear more of that now, and everybody's going to say they're going to move to a different country if he gets elected, but probably won't happen.
I would have moved to Canada when W was elected, but my wife didn't agree to that. But I absolutely would have moved to Vancouver. I was like, well, why the heck not? You get healthcare for free, and there's lots of benefits to living there. And it's beautiful, and we wouldn't have to live in George W. Bush's America. So yeah, I would have done it, but there was pushback, and understandably so. It's very hard to uproot yourself.
It's cold there, Hal.
I would just say this: don't renew your passport quite yet, Arlen. I think there's there's a lot can happen in a year. Yes. Trump is a very, he's not a great vessel for the Republicans, I think, to captain he's not the best captain of the Republican vessel in terms of steering around icebergs. So we'll see. But I don't think the news is quite, I would even go this so far. I think you're more pessimistic than the current situation warrants or than Bowie. I think there's a little alarmism creeping in that may not be warranted. Let me put it that way.
Well, I hope you're right, Hal. But yeah, it's a long time till that election day, and a lot will happen. You can count on that. So it's very unpredictable.
We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow. Arlen and I will be back, I hope, before the end of the year. Yes, we do have to negotiate this. It's kind of like the Hamas Likud arguments. I mean, it's going to be tough. Someone's going to have to twist their arms. Maybe Joe Biden will have to get involved, but my guess is at some point we'll come to an agreement on time. Arlen, have a great week. Have a great trip back.
All right, take care. Thank you.
And that'll do it for both of us.